Everybody, PC here, and welcome to Concert Artistry, the first in 2023. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone, or I should say, as a friend of mine said, since we've been through so much, happier New Year. But I look forward to sharing some ideas with you, and as you know, I'm going to do a little bit of, never mind. The whole idea of this concert artistry is to take our ensembles beyond the notes. We want it to be more meaningful, more memorable, and certainly create a more musical experience for our students. And that's what the concert artistry is all about. Obviously, nobody wants to listen to a bad ensemble. We want our bands and orchestras to play in tune and in tone and in time. But, you know, and guilty as charged when I was a young teacher. Sometimes it's so easy to get hung up on the notes that we totally forget about the music. And, you know, and I speak from experience because I have judged literally thousands of festivals and concerts and state contests in which many of the ensembles play in tune and in tone and in time. They've taken care of all the details. They can play all the technique, but it is absolutely devoid of any musical soul. And so that's what this is going to be about tonight, because I believe that musical expression is not something that you add after everything else is in place. And think about this. If we work to make sure that Johnny gets all of his A flats on trombone, and that may take a couple of weeks for him to remember that. And if we work to make sure that this certain passage is in tune and that we can line up all of the 16th notes or all of the technique, that may take weeks. And if we're not working on the musical aspect as well, what we're really doing is practicing a non-musical event. And by the time we get around to adding the music, we've already trained those neural paths in a very non-musical manner. So I believe that even if we have to live with that A flat until the next rehearsal, we can all teach Johnny how to start taking that A flat and moving it in the right direction to shape a phrase. And what we're talking about is score study. Now, please don't go running, screaming from the room because I'm using the word score study, because when I talk to people about score study, especially young teachers, they seem to think that score study involves what we did back in form and analysis, where you have to analyze every chord, and we're looking for, is that a French sixth or a German sixth or a whatever. Beth, we okay?
No, I think we're having a weird technical issue. Would you be able to stop your screen share and start it back over again? Your slides are flashing and it's
okay. Well,
yeah, I'm so sorry. It's the gremlins, I think.
Okay, so let me if I can find stop share. I can't find my let me just do that. Okay, now I can stop share. Okay.
All right, let's just redo it, start it over again. I'm so sorry to have interrupted.
No, I'm glad you interrupted so that I wouldn't go blathering along. Okay, so this is what we want.
Yeah, we had disco slides there for a second. They were just flashing.
Okay, how are we doing?
Well, that one's beautiful.
All right,
I think we should be good to go.
Let's try the second one.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, should I start all over again?
Oh, heavens no. Let's just pick it up from where we're talking about.
Okay.
So thank you.
So we'll get to, we don't want to listen to a bad ensemble. We're gonna get hung up on the notes. Now back to score study, and don't run through the room. And what we're talking about here is, you know, we want to discover the music within. But in my many years of talking to people about how do you study score, I've never discovered one person who studies score in the same manner. And of course, we're different learners. We're visual learners, we're oral learners, whatever. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the difference between pedagogical score study, which is very necessary. But to me, pedagogical score study is looking at the score and deciding how we're going to teach the piece and planning our rehearsals every day. What I want to talk about tonight is musical score study, which should come first, in my humble opinion. And so no two conductors study scores in the same manner. So what I'm going to present tonight is what I call score study light. And the reason I'm doing it in this manner is that many years ago, when I was in graduate school, Ingolf Dahl was in residence, and we were playing the Dahl Sinfonietta, which is one of my favorite pieces in the whole world. And we had a graduate seminar in which we all had our scores, and he talked through the score. And it was the first time I'd ever seen music through the eyes of the composer. And I was absolutely blown away by how much I missed of his compositional techniques. And so from that point on, I began to look at scores differently. But again, what I've come up with may not work for you, except for these two things. They're two small steps. And I guarantee you, if you do these two things, your band will be better, or your orchestra, than 95% of the groups that I judge. First of all, determine phrase shapes and dynamic relationships. And secondly, develop a balance of lines so that ensemble clarity is achieved. First, shaping the phrase. And in order to shape a phrase, it requires that we teach an ever-expanding vocabulary of dynamics. If an ensemble can only play loud and louder, or what I call mezzo mediocre, it's very difficult to craft a phrase that starts at point A and moves to point B and back. So that's hand in hand with what we're doing. So, and also, I think it's important for us all to realize that there's more than one right answer. I've used an example here of the whole E flat. And, the little dotted crescendi and decrescendi are just what I call suggested phrase marks. So if we're going down to the B flat, the second one crescendos all the way to the B flat in the fourth measure. And the third example, I won't sing it for you, crescendos all the way to the B flat at the end. That would take a really very well-developed musician to do that. But the point is that there's an answer there, and there's more than one right answer. And what we want to do also, I think, is, we talk a lot about how important it is. Music teaches students to think. Well, not if we say, take out your pencils and crescendo from letter A to 4 bars and mark that mezzo forte, and then decrescendo back to mezzo piano and bar 10. But we don't tell them the why. And so we may have a little phrase shape going on, but there's no musical understanding. There's no musical soul. And in order to do that, I like to encourage student opinions. What do you think about that phrase? How do you think that should be phrased? And, we can do things like have the students play, we can have a melody and have students take turns phrasing differently and coming up with different ideas. Students are really pretty opinionated, and when you let them have an opinion about the music, it's really a good thing. It's very educational, because what we want to do is paint an interesting musical landscape. That's called creativity. And I think you'll all agree that unless you're playing John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, that all music is either moving towards a moment of greater intensity or away from it. Now, that moment of greatest intensity may be very, very soft, but nonetheless, it's going somewhere. And once we understand that and make that part of our score study, where is the music going? And I think it was Sir George Solti said that in every great piece of music, and the qualifier there is great piece of music, there is one moment of greatest intensity, and everything else is balanced to that. And it's a good way to start looking at scores, so that we don't reach a climatic point and then 64 bars later realize that in order to reach a greater climatic point, we've already reached the apex of our dynamic control. So we want to teach students to look for moments of tension and release. And I like to teach this by engaging the kinesthetic. So here's a good exercise. Play a recording of something and have the students close their eyes and give them each a rubber band. And when they feel the music is moving towards greater intensity, they stretch the rubber band. When it is relaxing, they go in the opposite direction. And if you'll do that with me, just if you don't have a rubber band handy, just do a virtual rubber band. Here we go. I know you know this piece. So what we want to do is discover the high point. Isn't that great music? Some other ways to do that is to have students become human dynameters and maybe have half of your ensemble play and the other half closes their eyes and listens and see if what they're doing in a phrase shape can elicit a feeling of a rise and fall. Sometimes the kids will do this because they're not hearing any dynamic shape at all, but it teaches us to learn to want to feel the music as well as just hear it. And the second thing, and this is a great exercise, have the kids play and say, we're going to play a 16-bar phrase. So we're going to play through this once, and I want you to decide where the high point of the phrase is. So you play through it once, and then you go back and say, I'm going to start you, and I'm not going to conduct this time. I want you to hold on the note that you think is the most important, the most intense, or the highest point in the phrase. And, you know, it's really interesting because sometimes you'll have 3 or 4 different opinions before they reach a consensus. But again, there's really no wrong answer. But if we can get the kids to start thinking about where the music is going, to feel that, to do what they need to do with their air and with the percussion instruments, then we're making music. We're not just playing notes anymore. The second thing, and this is something that is totally lacking in so many ensembles that I hear, and that is recalibrating dynamics so you have a balance of lines. I have an example here of the Ray Fun Williams, and hey, coming from Mississippi, I used to call him Ralph Fun Williams. So we learn something every day, don't we? This is a Vaughan Williams folk song suite. And I've created what I call a hierarchy of lines. And this is what I do when I study scores, because I want to know what the composer feels is the most important thing. Sometimes it's a melodic line. Sometimes it may be on an equal basis with a counter melodic line. But here, the first thing I want to hear, I think Vaughan Williams would agree, is that we want to hear the melody. The second thing I want to hear is this nice little counter line that's in the bass clarinet and the horns and the saxes. And unless I studied the score well, I would have totally missed that and it would have been buried. Then I want to hear the bass line. Next is the harmonic rhythm, jump, 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 and last but not least is the percussion part. That's my hierarchy of lines. You may find another hierarchy, but once I do that, then I recalibrate the dynamics, because remember, the composer doesn't know whether you're going to have 2 trombones or 20, whether they're great players or maybe they're young players. And so we have to recalibrate the dynamics to fit our instrumentation. And incidentally, you'll notice here that the dynamic for the whole piece, with the exception of percussion, is double F. If everyone played double F, what we have is, you know, it's when we have an unbalanced ensemble, it's like listening through a fog. And I feel that way a lot when I'm listening to ensembles, because everybody's playing the same dynamic. And of course, we always have, you know, you point to a trombone player who's playing a whole note fortissimo and totally obliterating a flute part. And you say, you know, do you know who has the melody? And obviously not, because they're having so much fun playing that whole note. But instead of saying, change that to piano, what I usually say is, adjust your dynamics until you can hear the melody. The other thing that I require in all of my ensembles, if I point to someone, they need to be listening beyond their part so they can tell me who they think it has the most important part. Is it their line? Is it another line? Teaching kids to listen and understand the music is, you know, a lifelong task, but it makes a big difference. So that's teaching melodic awareness or thematic awareness. And you can do that even with very young players. So in order to create art in our music, to create musical artistry, I think the first thing that we can do is talk about phrase shape. We want to create an interesting musical landscape, not a wasteland. And second, we'll balance lines, not only to create ensemble and clarity, but when you start thinking about balancing lines, then you start studying the score to say, well, I wonder if the composer wanted this counter melodic line to be equally as important as the melody. Oh, wait a minute, we've already heard the melody. Maybe this little obligato part should become, in other words, we're trying to discover the composer's intent, because if it is a great piece of music, and there's that qualifier, if it's a great piece of music, all the answers are going to be in the score. So if we want to take our ensembles beyond the notes, and this is just kind of like dipping your feet in the water of score study, because I know that once you start looking at a score for more than just pedagogical, but for musical reasons, it's like great chocolate. You can't eat just one piece. You want to go deeper and deeper and deeper to take your students beyond the notes. So in order to do that, we have to have an informed musical opinion. When I stand on the podium, I want to own it, because I think that music must have a soul. And that soul is only possible when we interpret a piece and do our very best to understand the intent of the composer and do everything that we can to make sure that that intent comes through. So what we're talking about here is, if we want to make more music, we have to continue searching for answers. Curiosity is a great way to learn. In order to create meaningful music, I think, and that's the only way we can perpetuate our art, the only way to ensure that music remains a vibrant and vital artistic force in the lives of our students, is to take that level of musical experience far beyond the notes to a place where a deeply emotional experience is possible. It transports the performer and the audience to a place so beautiful or so profound or so meaningful that they'll want to come back to that again and again for the rest of their lives. That's what making music is all about. And I think you'll agree that we didn't join this profession because we wanted to get a wanted contest. We devoted our lives to music because music gives us something that touches our soul in a way that nothing else can. And know that when you share that gift of music, my friends, that you share one of the most precious gifts in the world. My philosophy is that the more you give to the music, the more the music will give you in return. So in 2023, I hope you have a great year. If you want to learn more and satisfy your curiosity, come to Conselmer Institute in the summer. It's a wonderful place to join all of your colleagues who are all about making music as well. And here's a sneak preview of what's happening in February, and I'm so excited to share this with you. We're going to continue this score study, and this time we're going to give you an idea of how to look at music through the eyes of a composer. And I have one of the best composers of wind band literature lined up to share his thoughts with you, Frank DeKelly. And he's going to talk about two pieces that I know a lot of you are familiar with. And one is the Cajun folk songs, and the other is his simple gifts. But to say that his musical mind is genius is an understatement. And the fact that he's willing to take time to share his passion with you is well worth watching. So same time, same station, February. And I'll look forward to seeing you there. Happy New Year, everybody.